Hello, everyone. Before we begin, I'll share just a couple of procedural things about the webinar today. You will notice that the chat function has been disabled. Throughout the presentation, instead of using the chat function, you can reach us through using the Q&A, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A's main purpose is for you to pose questions to our speaker, Stefan. You can pose those throughout the webinar as things come up for you, and then we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. I promise we'll make plenty of time for Q&A. However, there's a dual function for the Q&A feature where you can, if you run into any technical difficulties or any issues, pose any questions you'd like in there, and myself or my colleagues in the background will get back to you. You'll also find that there's a survey at the end of the webinar. It will both be posted on the screen and in the chat, as well as sent to you via email. We hope that you will take that survey and let us know what you liked, if there's anything you'd like changed about the webinar process, and also what you'd like to see for future webinars. You'll notice that this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to AVA's YouTube channel shortly. That means you can revisit and share this webinar at any time, as well as our previous webinars. Once I'm done with the introduction, I'll post the link in the chat where you can locate our past and upcoming webinars. Without further ado, welcome to the Alliance Against Violence and Adversity's Webinar Wednesdays. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Yersich. With AVA, I'm an early career researcher and lead of the webinar series. Outside of that role, I'm the co-director of the Frida Center for Research on Violence Against Women and Children at Simon Fraser University and faculty in the social sciences at Capilano University. I'm joining you today from the unceded traditional and ancestral territories of the Coquitlam First Nation, and on behalf of AVA, which is a national organization, I want to begin by acknowledging that we encourage all Canadians and visitors to Canada to learn about the Indigenous peoples of the lands on which they live, work, or visit, and become engaged allies together. We, as Canadians, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, respect the self-determination of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and their rights and responsibilities in cultures, languages, and the pursuit of wellness. Today, I'm so happy to welcome back our speaker, Stefan Kurbatfinski, who will be joining us for today's webinar to speak on empowering student trainees, academics, and community agency leaders to address gender-based violence and adverse childhood experiences, evaluating AVA's mentorship and internship programs. Stefan is a fourth-year doctoral student in the Department of Community Health Sciences, Cumming School of Medicine at the University of Calgary, Alberta, and he's also an incredibly valued member of the AVA team. He is committed to conducting research that targets and identifies health disparities among families experiencing vulnerabilities, with an emphasis on sexual and gender minority groups. Mr. Kurbatfinski has planned a postdoctoral position at the University of Toronto, in which he hopes to further investigate longitudinal parent-child development among sexual and gender minority parents and their children. Stefan, welcome back. I'm so excited to listen again today.
Hey, thank you for that. Yeah, it's nice to be here. And good afternoon, everyone. So just making sure this works. Cool. Yeah, just as Sarah just mentioned, my name's Stefan. I'm a student at the University of Calgary, and today I will be presenting on two core programs that we have here with AVA, and that's the Triadic Mentorship Program and our internship program. I just want to highlight that this is work that I could not have done without Doctors Ashley Stewart-Tufescu and Nicole Letourneau, who are really leading those two programs. Nicole is the whole PI of AVA and really the director of it and made it happen. So lots of thanks to both of them and all the other AVA members too. So a quick overview of the presentation. I'll start with my positionality, followed by an overview of what gender-based violence and adverse childhood experiences are, a brief overview of the transdisciplinary approach in research and in broader context, general information about AVA, and then the two main purposes. So the first are to describe the two programs, and the second is to summarize preliminary evaluations of them. And then last, I'll discuss next steps briefly, and then we'll have some time for questions or a discussion period. And as Sarah also mentioned, it's really important to discuss and to reflect on Indigenous lands, especially given that AVA is a national sort of organization. So while here I'm in Calgary, we have the Blackfoot Confederacy comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations. We also have the Tsuut'ina First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda, comprised of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Gistoni First Nations. And also we're home to the Métis Nation within Alberta, so that includes Nose Hill Métis District 5 and Elbow Métis District 6. With this in mind, though, I just really want to reiterate that while, we have the 94 calls to action, those need to be reread quite a few times as it's quite long and it's really important, but easy to forget some aspects of it. And it's just important to keep rereading them and refreshing our minds on what sort of needs to be done to sort of rectify the injustices that have been made towards Indigenous people. And also that there's a lot of intersections between the oppressions that Indigenous groups experience and why that might relate to higher rates of GBV, gender-based violence, or adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, among these groups. So while it's not to blame them, it's to blame the sort of the systems and these oppressions that they continue to experience, and really just creates health inequities for these two groups. So my positionality in this research is I'm a PhD candidate. As Sarah mentioned, I am in my fifth year, actually, I believe. I don't know, I've lost count. I started the master's program, so I fast-tracked, and the timeline's just a bit wonky there. I research a lot of mother-child health, intimate partner violence, family violence, and attachment theory, so that's kind of the main work I do for my dissertation. However, my own personal experiences have really motivated the work that I do. And as mentioned, Dr. Nicole, who's the Letourneau, who's the scientific director of AVA, she's also my primary supervisor. I am a cis gay white able-bodied man, so while I'm speaking on women's experiences and gender diverse individuals' experiences with gender-based violence and ACEs, I try to sort of be more objective in that and situate sort of my gender and identity within that scope of research and community-based work. I have been recently appointed one of AVA's sexual and gender minority champions, so I'm really hoping to co-lead and create more equity within how gender diversity is discussed, not just within AVA, but within the research and the work that I do across my lifespan. And lastly, I did kind of lead the development of the two papers linked to the AVA TMP and the CAPE. So I just bring all of this up because you could see that there's maybe potential for conflict of interest, but I'm really going to try to be as objective as I can while I discuss the two programs. So really quickly, Ava's focused on two core sort of themes, as I mentioned. So the first is gender-based violence. We use the term GBV to acronymize it. There's also adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. So I'll start with gender-based violence. It is violence enacted towards individuals because of their perceived or actual gender. So we see that often girls, women, and gender diverse people are sort of the individuals that experience gender-based violence. It exacerbates social inequities and really lowers quality of life because you could imagine that a lot of violence within one's life can cause a lot of disruptions and result in sort of, mental health, physical health outcomes, and just difficulty with relationships, socioeconomic attainment. Here I kind of pulled a figure and maybe it's a bit small, but I'm just showing sort of the proportion of gender-based violence that's being reported by Statistics Canada, and I believe it was before, like 2019, I believe this was from. And as you can see, heterosexual men are at the lowest proportion of experiencing gender-based violence, while sexual and gender minority are at the highest. So again, sort of tying in gender here, we can see that men are less likely to experience violence while women are more likely to. And again, this is attributed to sort of perceived or actual gender. Adverse childhood experiences, on the other hand, is violence enacted towards children under the age of 18. Traditionally, it was referred to sort of only those adversities that happen within the household, and that originated in Felipe et al.'s study in 1998 using a national sample of American individuals. Since then, it kind of has expanded, so we can tie in sort of, homophobia or discrimination towards one's gender identity within the household. We can also tie in racism within the community as a childhood experience. So it's kind of been broadening and becoming more inclusive. However, there's still a lot of work to do in that regard. With that being said, ACEs are highly prevalent in Canada. Many studies show that at least 60% of the population has experienced at least one ACE. This again is more amplified within certain groups. So we see that as people become older, individuals who are Indigenous or sexual and gender minorities can often experience more ACEs as opposed to their cis heterosexual white counterparts. And here I've included sort of the 10 main traditional ACEs that we talk about. So with that being said, too, people will answer a questionnaire with all 10 of these ACEs, and essentially what they find is that the more of these experiences that you say yes to, the more likely you are to experience worsened health outcomes. So in regards to abuse, there's physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. In regards to neglect, there's physical and emotional neglect. Physical neglect could be, not providing children with adequate nutrition or food, or not providing physical touch as a form of love. Mental illness and witnessing family violence or intimate partner violence between parents is also another form of household dysfunction. We see divorce, incarceration of a relative, and also substance use. However, it's not really listed on here, but parental loss and separation can also be forms of ACEs. And what do we know? So as I mentioned, there's really a dose-response relationship. So the more ACEs that someone experiences, the worse, and they have outcomes for a lot of different factors. We can see worse health outcomes. We see lower economic attainment, more relational problems, later engagement in risky health behaviors, violence, and substance use. So individuals with ACEs may be more likely to be incarcerated themselves. Really, ACEs perpetuate adversity within the next generation. And as you can imagine, that can cause a host of negative outcomes for these individuals. And so why is there a gap? Because we do know that GBV and ACEs have been extensively studied. We know that they're harmful. We know that they're prevalent, but they still remain inadequately addressed. And we could link that to the idea that the way that we're addressing GBV and ACEs is very siloed. So individuals who are actually providing direct support to these individuals, aka community agencies or frontline staff, they kind of work separately from academics who are really refined or sort of confined into their university settings. Academics have a very competitive sort of fast-paced environment where it's a lot about publishing, so they might not often be engaging with these groups. So these two groups often stay isolated, and because of this, the research that we develop is not necessarily translated into the settings in which people are providing service, and therefore service may not necessarily always be of highest quality or using the most up-to-date knowledge. So this requires a team with various backgrounds. And that sort of ties into the idea of transdisciplinarity, which I found this quote in this article by Vanessa Van Buer, and that was published in 2017. And it's defined as transcending of disciplinary boundaries, a sharing of knowledge, skills, and decision-making, a focus on real-world problems, and the inclusion of multiple important parties, including patients and those with lived experiences, their families, and their communities. So the whole point of this is researchers traditionally have just sort of done the work on their own and maybe not necessarily always included other individuals, such as those with lived experiences or those providing direct support. So transdisciplinarity tries to overcome that and sort of unite everyone to work together to address the same problem. And that kind of leads us to the Alliance Against Violence University, or AVA. So AVA was formed by, as I mentioned, Dr. Nicole Letourneau to create capacity to transform community health services to promote health and wellness of girls, women, and gender diverse people. And specifically, we were targeting gender-based violence and adversity. So the AVA tries to bring in graduate students, academics, community-based agency providers, and persons with lived experience. Everyone is either seen as a scholar or a learner. And so we have a large committee, and this committee is full of diverse people. And as I mentioned, I'm a sexual and gender minority champion recently appointed, but we also have different types of champions. We have a racialized champion, and we also have a Indigenous champion. So again, there's a host of different diversities, experiences, and expertises that sort of unite to lead and inform how AVA does its objectives and work. And so, as I mentioned, it unites quite a few groups, but overall, it's aiming to break down barriers between siloed sectors. And here's just an illustration of sort of what AVA is doing here. So on the left, we have the Indigenous Women's and Girls Health Hubs. This is kind of a separate entity, but it's still a part of AVA. It is led by Dr. Marlon Bennett. I might have gotten the last name wrong. I really apologize if I did. But it's kind of her own work, and kind of we let them have the freedom to do the work there, although it's tied in with AVA's objectives. But on the right here, you can see, and hopefully you can see my clicker. We have a few programs. I'm today specifically going to be talking about the TMP in the Cape. We just submitted a paper on the AVA Online, which I also helped co-lead, and that's sort of a free educational resource online that you can access. Anyone has access to it. and you can go through a bunch of certificates, and some of it can actually be seen as credit in certain universities. I think it's just University of Athabasca for now, but yeah. So today there's two objectives that I want to talk about, which I mentioned. It's to describe the TMP and the CAPE, and the second is to summarize preliminary evaluations of them. So naturally, I'll start with the second objective, but obviously I'm kidding, so I will start with the first. Um, so the TMP is a mentorship that was developed to unite a trainee, academic, and community-based agency leader. It was initially designed to be 18 months in length, but over time we've made it more flexible, and it really depends on how fast and how much time each constituent has in this sort of mentorship program. So academics and community-based agency leaders serve as the mentors. So although it's supposed to be three, sometimes it can be more. I myself had a TMP and a CAPE, and I've had two academics and then one internship. And even one of the academics has just finished their PhD. They're in their postdoc, so they're also serving as like an intermediary mentor, getting mentorship experience on being a mentor. But overall, the mentorship is supposed to be reciprocal, so everyone's supposed to be engaged and provide support and learn from each other, and it's matched based on suitability. Overall, during the TMP, what people are mainly doing is they're discussing their career ambitions. So mentees will talk about what they are currently doing, what would they like to do, and what skills do they have yet to learn to get in order to get to where they want to be. Mentors are sort of encouraged to share their career experiences and other lived experiences to help in sort of mentees have a better understanding of what it might look like where to get where they want to be. And then there's also a large aspect of it is networking. So we provide mentors and mentees for opportunities for networking. So even though there's this sort of triadic mentorship group, there's also the larger, AVA. So people are encouraged to also discuss with other like sort of triads or other community-based agencies or mentors that or academic mentors that are within AVA. So to be eligible to be in the TMP, it's kind of broad and not necessarily too specific because we want to make it equitable and encourage a lot of people to join. But mentees should have an overall goal to align with AVA's objectives and a desire and willingness to apply equity, diversity, inclusivity, and accessibility, which is a core concept and pillar of AVA. They have to have some sort of qualifications, so at least some previous experience outside of academia, some excellence relative to grades, awards, and/or community volunteerism, and official status as a graduate or postdoctoral fellow at a Canadian institution. For mentors, we see similar for the first three, but the last two are different. So we see that mentors also have to have a commitment to following through with all mentorship expectations and also have acknowledged that they've read the program guidelines and mentorship expectations. So to complete TMP, as mentioned, their triads are mentioned to or expected to meet at least once a month or as decided as the triad. The main thing of the TMP that's expected to be done is to complete an individual development plan. So it's referred to as IDP. This is based on a CIHR template, and it's a pretty lengthy document that really kind of gets students to kind of think about what they want to do in their life, sort of what their career ambitions are, research ambitions. And then the mentors are expected to review it, provide some feedback. And then for those next following 18 months or whatever the triad decides on, these three individuals meet and sort of discuss how they can help the student maybe get there more quickly or at least reframe and create a new sort of plan to get to where they want to be. There's also a community of practice, or referred to as the COP. So TMP scholars are expected to meet. I can't remember how frequently this was. We've met, I believe, every 3 months, but I think it can differ based on the cohort. And during the COP, not only mentees, but also mentors are encouraged to join. We discuss what's been going on, and that sort of ties into that aspect of networking where you can learn more from others, not just your triad. And individuals are expected to complete a midpoint and endpoint evaluation. The CAPE, on the other hand, it's an internship funded, it's internship funded, and this is by AVA. So it's really to help individuals who want to sort of gain real life community-based research experience. So it's really to foster capacity to participate within community-based agencies. As you can imagine, because it's so siloed, sometimes and oftentimes students leave universities or graduate studies without having any direct experience working within the agencies that they're actually trying to support. So this is really a way to sort of try to fill that gap and allow people to sort of have that real life experience and gain insight from those who are actually doing the hands-on work with these patients or clients or people with lived experience. Internships are also flexible in length and based on the expected amount of time, the amount of funding that is provided will differ. It's also matched on suitability. So what we did see is often, at least in the first cohort, TMPs would extend into a CAPE. At first, it was made that you have to do a TMP to do a CAPE, but now it's sort of separate. So you don't have to have been part of a TMP to do a CAPE. You can solely just sort of register for a CAPE. Although I believe registration right now for the CAPE is not necessarily ongoing, but there is still a few internships that are going. Um, yeah, so you can imagine too, for people who are sort of in this triadic mentorship program, having, discussed what community-based research might look like is one thing, but then being able to actually apply that through the internship program allows them the sort of that lived experience and a better understanding of how to engage in research within healthcare settings or social work settings or any sort of frontline service. So the CAPE has two main goals, just to kind of reiterate. The first is to provide practical hands-on and funded opportunities for interns. And this is to have also a agency leader that sort of supports them and mentors them in a more community-based setting. The second is to increase interns' confidence, competence, and skills in working with community partners, but also vice versa, for community partners to also sort of become more comfortable with welcoming research into their practice or evaluation. CAPE recruitment, so agency leaders are expected to complete questions about the agency project that they are required sort of inquiring for. And then they can also invite interns if they want. So that can be a graduate student, or it has to be a graduate student, but they can sort of try to bring someone in and see if that they might be a good fit. Interns that aren't invited themselves sort of apply through online. It was kind of a competitive process at the start. So fill in a survey and also like a resume, and you also provide an online application. And then there's also an interview process, and that's sort of how interns were selected. Again, we tried to be, although it's competitive, I also believe it was still quite equitable and equal and is quite new. So we were really encouraging students to participate. And here, this is kind of a wordy slide, so I apologize. And here's just a few examples of some of the internships we've done. Um, I don't necessarily want to talk too much on them because these weren't internships that I was a part of, but just to see that we're also across the country. So the first one's in Toronto, Ontario. The second one's in British Columbia. There's one that's in Alberta, Edmonton, and then there's also this one in Calgary. I took one out because it was a bit too long for the slide, but that one was in Manitoba. So again, spread across Canada. So now I'm going to go on to the second objective, which is to summarize preliminary evaluations of the TMP and CAPE. The first one I will start with is the TMP evaluations. This one has just been submitted in the Social Sciences and Humanities Open Journal, so it's currently under review. Hopefully, we get positive feedback. The fact that it hasn't been rejected right away is a good sign. And here are the colleagues at the bottom. So this is a paper that I led, and then also had a lot of support from the following 5 individuals you can see at the bottom. Really briefly, this is always the boring slides, is methods. So we used a structured survey using, closed and open-ended multi-select and Likert scale questions. It totaled to 33 questions. Data collection occurred from April to June 2025. We had initially collected data, but the data was kind of odd. We had used different platforms to collect data. So Suzanne Marshall and I and Ashley Stewart Tefesco, we all kind of met together and created a new survey and sent it out. And we were really pleased with how many responses we were able to get. Demographics questions were included to characterize our sample. We also made sure that the survey was available to be completed anonymously, and a $15 gift card was offered as compensation. We did use SurveyMonkey to collect the data and identify trends, and we used qualitative analysis via deductive approaches. So that means that we had predetermined themes that we were hoping to sort of elucidate. So overall, we had a pretty relatively even spread of mentees, agency leaders, and academic mentors, although agency leaders were the least represented at 8 versus mentees at 14. Most mentees were interested in both ACEs and GBV, followed by GBV and then ACEs. And then an equal number of community agency leaders were interested in both GBV and ACEs. None were solely interested in ACEs. Most academic mentors were also interested in both GBV and ACEs, followed by ACEs and then gender-based balance. And what I also wanted to mention quick is we had briefly just asked about individuals who may be self-identified as an equity deserving group. So most mentees and mentors, over 70% in each group, did identify as an equity deserving group, unlike academic mentors, which were 33%. And over half of each group also identified as someone with lived experience of ACEs or GBV. And often we do see that a lot of individuals with lived experience will sort of go into that field of research too, because they feel propelled and sort of energized to reverse sort of what's happened to them or prevent what's happened to them to other people. So this slide is kind of a blend of mixed methods data. So overall, we saw that the tried members had positive experiences throughout the TMP. They did see it as a valuable learning opportunity, and it was actually really seen as mutual. So it wasn't just solely like this dominated mentorship by the mentors. It was seen as both individuals or all three constituents having equal contribution throughout the mentorship. It was also an opportunity to promote professional development related to transdisciplinarity and community-based research, and also an opportunity to promote personal development. We saw that most participants were satisfied with the duration of the TMP, would recommend it to others, and that they enjoyed the triad format, especially given that people had different backgrounds. Lastly, the semi-structured format was also well regarded. And also, again, these next slides might be a bit wordy because there's quite a few quotes that I put on here, but I just wanted to put them in there to kind of take home and show what people were kind of talking about each one of these themes. So for overall satisfaction, we saw that there was one, this is kind of a more negative one, but that there was little opportunity to focus on career development tasks, such as working through the individual development plan. Um, that we also saw, but on the other side, we saw that academics maybe saw it a bit more positively, where they saw that people they felt like they learned a lot from their community agency mentor and the students, and they even said that they're partnering on lots of things moving forward. Another one said that it was a very nice semi-structured way of engaging in a process where the starting point is not often clear. So even me as a student right now, I think I would be a bit unsure of where to sort of start and how to approach community-based agencies because throughout my courses that I took, I never really got to do that. So AVA's kind of made me feel more comfortable in doing that, and also sort of like the language that I need to integrate when I'm speaking with community agencies and understanding that our agendas might not necessarily be aligned. And then lastly, one of the academics said it's a great opportunity to develop relationships with a trainee and a community partner. But they also did state that they thought that the guiding purpose was not necessarily always clear. For triad satisfaction, one of the mentees thought that the triad was awesome in all capitals. We saw that some people saw lower satisfaction. This one was kind of interesting because this person felt that this mentee felt like it was not the best pairing because they weren't really connected with someone that's directly working in the space of GBV or ACEs. So this kind of also reflects the recruiting process because people who are partaking in the TMP should sort of have some sort of alignment or desire to promote to address GBV or ACEs. It was also very interesting. One academic said that they were all kind of kindred spirits, so there was just like a good connection and bond between these individuals, and that everyone was intentional about hearing the viewpoints and perspectives. Also, lower satisfaction. Oh, I did repeat that one twice, so I'm gonna pass that. So, um, additional outcomes that we saw was overall learning quality. One mentee said that it felt like some of the other mentors were a little more invested in the process than others. So this could be a reflection of busy schedules for some of those mentors. Likelihood of recommending, an academic mentor said that it was unlike anything currently offered in academia, which is quite an outstanding quote to hear. And then satisfaction with resources. Academic Six stated that there was not enough time in my schedule to explore them, while one said that they were great for those who want some structure, but it was helpful to get started, but didn't really need them later on. And I'm not trying to just paint a positive image from this. Oftentimes, people did not provide an open-ended response to these questions, so I'm just trying to pull what I could from our paper and from the quotes. So if it all seems positive sometimes, that wasn't intentional. That's just the quotes that I have. And also, all of these quotes and themes were graded on like a Likert scale, and most often they were on the higher positive scale. So that's why I didn't necessarily put those numbers in because it just would have made it look too convoluted. For professional development, we see that mentees reflected deeply on their goals, not just in research, but also outside of that, so collaboration and personal growth. One mentee even said that it kind of got them to do a sessional position in their teaching dossier. Agency leaders enjoyed hearing different perspectives on the same issues, and it also helped clarify their role between research and practice. And an academic mentor even mentioned that it helps them sort of learn the language, which is even what I just mentioned earlier. It's quite different to talk to individuals who are working directly in the community because as academics, again, we have really busy schedules and sometimes our agendas are just not necessarily aligned with what's sort of needed within actual society and within practice. So it's really important to learn how to sort of navigate that. And then one of the academic mentors also said that for them, most of the impact came actually from transitioning into the community agency internship program. On personal development, we saw some really interesting impacts that we didn't necessarily think about. One mentee, who was a mother, said that it actually helped them navigate their challenges of balancing motherhood with academia. So instead of seeing their motherhood as a limitation, they saw it as a source of strength. One mentee also said that it gave them courage and determination to go forward with their proposed thesis research, which is funny because I was just telling Sarah that I was kind of working on this presentation while also working on my dissertation, and it's hard to always have motivation to work on it. But yeah, I think a lot of the work that I've done with the AVA, TMP, and CAPE have made me realize how important this research is and how much more I would like to apply it now within community-based agencies. Agencies leaders discussed that it helped them actually pursue higher education. So one agency leader decided to actually go back to school, which is really remarkable. We see academic mentors found that they learned a lot from agency leaders, in all honesty. It was a really big thing we wrote about in the paper, but academic mentors found working with agency leaders incredibly powerful. It really gave them insight in how to work more optimally, I suppose, within community-based agencies, but also how to conduct research that's more relevant to everyone. And then TMP and the likelihood of doing research with community partners. Mentees did mention that essentially they wanted to reflect more on how they could engage in research within the community. Um, and also one of the academic mentors mentioned that it kind of made them feel more resolved about the importance of connections. Again, it can be super siloed. So we need this person stated that they need community service provider partners deeply involved in academic research. So areas for improvement, there was four main categories. The first is to refine the TMP resources. So oftentimes we did see throughout the surveys or just on this Likert scales that perhaps it wasn't always clear what these TMP resources were for. They aren't necessarily like mandatory, but the IDP was a core construct of it, and that was something that we did really expect people to finish. Um, Even from my own personal experiences, I did find it sometimes difficult to always understand what was needed, but the IDP itself was incredibly valuable, in my opinion, and it really did help me sort of solidify what I'd like to do throughout the TMP and then later on within the CAPE, which I also joined. Tried matching, although it was overall seen pretty positively. As I mentioned, there was some difficulties with it. What the main problem came from the fact that someone had joined who wasn't necessarily directly involved with GBV or ACEs. So that also shows future directions for ourselves as members of AVA who are sort of matching people together. Clarifying the roles of each triad member. So sometimes there was not a full understanding of the purpose of everyone's roles with the TMP. And that could also just be a reflection of the fact that initially it was 18 months long, and perhaps people felt like they didn't need that much time. So once they hit 12 months, maybe they felt like they weren't too sure what was still going on within the next 6 months. And lastly, clarifying commitment to the TMP. So this is in terms of busy schedules. If people are joining the TMP, I think there's sort of this accountability that everyone's having for themselves. So making sure that if someone's joining the TMP, they can commit to the meeting once a month, or if not, at least sharing on the onset how often they can meet and how much they can contribute to then match maybe people with more busier schedules together. Next, I'll talk about the CAPE evaluation. So this paper has been published, and it's published in Child Protection and Practice. That was published earlier this year. I really think this paper is quite interesting, and yeah, so I'm co-led this with Astor Stewart Tefesco and everyone else on this author list at the bottom too. And here's a QR code if you're interested in searching it. It's open access, so you should be able to access it without a problem. It's quite interesting. And I'll stay here just for a few seconds to if anyone wants to scan the QR code. Okay, cool. If you haven't had the chance and you do want to, just let me know, and I can easily come back to this slide later. So similar sort of method slide, again, a bit boring, but has to be said. And it's very similar to sort of what was done with the TMP. We had a structured survey. It was conducted from 2023 to 2024. We also used SurveyMonkey to collect data. And then actually, SurveyMonkey can allow you to identify trends, which might sound like not the right software for it, but it actually does a pretty good job. So we did do that, but we also used um, Excel files and SPSS to also just do descriptive statistics. And then qualitative analysis was once again used via deductive approaches. So we had predetermined themes that we were hoping to sort of elucidate. So some key findings that we found in this was that interns engage in numerous tasks and activities, both soft and hard skills. There was a collaboration with multiple diverse groups, and it was also perceived as an obstacle for interns. Community agency leaders perceived interns' busy schedule as a barrier to successful internship completion. Both perceived positive impacts on professional and personal growth, so interns developed a greater understanding for collaboration. So while collaborating with multiple groups was sort of seen as a barrier for interns, they also felt like they became more comfortable with it and they understood why it's maybe a slower pace within community-based agencies, whereas agency leaders developed greater capacity for research evaluation and more comfort with it. I remember when I started my master's program, research was so novel to me. So having good mentorship and sort of exposing me to what research is and sort of the methods along with it was really helpful. I'm very, very grateful for the supervisors I have in that sense. And agency leaders were also generally content with the CAPE and were able to leverage intern skills so that they were actually more comfortable again in implementing and evaluating research within their practice. And interns were very satisfied with the CAPE, developing various skills and increased capacity to engage in research. So in terms of tasks and activities, these are quotes from agency leaders. We saw that several focus groups were conducted in one internship within the community. So that really provides opportunity to learn about valuable insights and perspectives from different parties. It also allows us to gather a rich array of qualitative data and develop a comprehensive report. So that actually enabled them sort of produce actionable recommendations that are tailored to the specific needs of the community. So you can really see how this sort of tackles that research to practice paradox gap. Another agency leader said that there was increased internal capacity around research and engaging in research. And another one said that while the immediate goal was to build and launch data management systems for nonprofits, they even found that those deliverables were, this person found that those deliverables were achieved even after the intern left, which is showing that it kind of keeps going even after the internship was over, because it sort of increased comfort and, again, the capacity to conduct sort of more research or data sort of styled approaches within community-based agencies. For interns, they learn to conduct in-depth policy literature reviews, policy briefs, and to present to larger bodies. We also saw that for one intern, they co-created an advocacy report for the city of Ottawa, which is really interesting. And they were able to develop a grant application, support children. So you can really see how this is quite a bit different than research, but also very well related to research. And yeah, so it's can kind of allow for this more community-based participatory approach. Another one developed various knowledge mobilization and translation resources, which is incredibly important because while we can produce research, it's really important to be able to actually communicate it properly and in a way that's interpretable. And another intern also said that they were able to gather input on programs from a vast number of organizations. So here they say 35 across the province, and then that really informed how programming was done and identified areas that needed to be enhanced. For barriers, the main one that I had already mentioned was that the busy schedule was sort of like challenging for some people to overlook. it can be really difficult because again, in academia, it's really fast paced. So learning to slow down again, slow down a bit, and also hear perspectives from everyone is a really critical skill that a lot of interns did say that they felt they kind of had learned following the internship. Um, this first, the second intern did also say that it wasn't necessarily clear what was going to be done throughout the internship. And then they ended up having to learn about social media knowledge mobilization, which was something they hadn't previously engaged in, and it actually then provided them with new skills. And one intern also said that there was challenges with time management, which of course is naturally expected when people are, concomitantly writing their thesis, working on research papers, and then also supporting a community-based agency. So the reason I didn't put any barriers from the agency leader's perspective is because they hadn't really written any out, but they did write sorry, yeah, so there was no quotes that I could directly pull for agency leaders. But benefits for agency leaders were that they had internal research support that allowed them to sort of integrate research within their agency and sort of be less intimidated by that process. One also said that it emphasized the importance of flexibility within within their work, sorry, and in the community as a whole, and also to be able to reshape goals to make sure that they align to their communities and to the project's sort of potential or how much resources is allowed or available for this research to be done. And then also one said that the project has the potential to contribute to implementation of services by making client information easier and more ethical to collect. So again, you can sort of see how this ties in with research evaluation and assessment and how if someone's sort of like if people working in a community-based agency never had research experience, this is a really novel and unique opportunity to sort of be exposed to that and integrate it even beyond the intern staying within the agency. For interns, the benefits was that they got to learn a lot about the co-creation of services across different important parties. Tying in empirical evidence and actually applying it into a community-based agency was really important, and that the process itself is, nuanced, but also crucial to the success and feasibility. Another intern said that policy advocacy was not an easy task and it requires persistence and determination. I remember taking a public health course, and so I only got to learn about the sort of more theoretical aspects of it, and it was already challenging enough. So I can imagine what it's like to apply it within a real um, agency-based setting. Another one also said that as the project progressed, that they learned that the pace of community work, as I mentioned, was kind of different. So there's a lot of waiting periods, which again can be tough. But this person saw additional tasks on their own, which exposed them to more experiences. And another intern also said that they learned the process of a collaborative approach to writing, editing, and reviewing, which is really the goal of AVA's CAPE is to sort of have more collaboration within the research process and beyond. And a few more benefits that interns had mentioned was that they practice self-reflexivity while doing community-based internship work. Another one said that the real ground experiences helped them identify facilitators and barriers of implementation science, which is an incredibly rich experience because as again, we can sort of suggest something that people do, but without actually being able to have that organizational structure to implement it, it can't necessarily be done. So this is really important. Um, Also, another intern said this is more related to the funding aspect of it, but being able to actually do community-based work and they're getting paid to it can actually help them feel a little less stressed um, outside of, just like making sure that they can financially sustain their lives. So areas for improvement, there was two main ones. It was the interns' time and competing interests. So again, interns themselves are still students, graduate level, which can be again very competitive. So trying to complete thesis work and coursework while also doing the internship can be quite challenging. So making sure that we ensure that when interns are applying for this, that we maybe outline more in detail what the expectations are and allowing so that students can actually self-reflect and ensure that they have the capacity for it. And a second was aligning expectations about roles and responsibilities. Not everyone always knew what was sort of going on during their internship program. There was, as I mentioned, waiting periods. So just making sure that there's maybe something for interns to do if there is a waiting period so that they feel like they're getting their internship done within the timelines that they were first told that it might be happening. So TMP and CAPE both regarded generally very positive. There are still barriers, as I mentioned, and gaps. So There is work to be done, but overall, they've been seen as quite positive. So the next steps are to expand it nationally. We would love to reach more eastern provinces, rural and northern areas, and more diverse sectors. And with that being said, we also want to expand internationally. So, like I said, it's been well regarded, but a lot of international locations have expressed interest in replicating the AVA model in their regions. So this is something that we would like to be able to do and are currently sort of trying to see how it can be done. We would like also are interested in, or we're also thinking about how to build more sustainability because, of course, with AVA being such a big and unique platform, it needs to be funded. So, and for example, the CAPE is directly providing financial support to students while they're while they're engaging in their internship. So, what are next steps to make this sustainable, and how can we make sure that it continues to benefit all the important parties that are involved? And lastly, this was really interesting, and Dr. Ashley Stewart Tefesco had mentioned this, but is there a way that we could follow people throughout their career trajectories and see if AVA benefited them in the long run so that it helped them sort of secure positions within the job market or just support their career trajectories more broadly? And I think this is a great time for me to sort of advertise it. So if you would like to, please scan this QR code. It'll take you to the AVA website. You can see sort of all these drop-down menus to get to different areas. But if you're interested in the TMP, again, this one's free. You can just sign up and you'll be paired, I believe we're recruiting right now for the next cohort anyways, which is supposed to start next January, so January 2026. So that's one thing you could look into. The AVA Online, which I mentioned earlier too, it's an educational resource. There's a bunch of different podcasts and videos that you can listen to, and those are all free. And you can sort of go through them and get credit as you go. Sorry, not credit, but certifications as you go through, and it kind of builds up on your knowledge. Again, really useful information, all for free. So we're trying to make it very accessible. So yeah, and that brings me to the end of the presentation. And I think there was a survey, Sarah. So this is the QR code, I believe.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stefan. Always such insightful presentations. And for those of you who are listening, Stefan's also done 2 other webinars for us so far. So please do check those out. There is the QR code for the survey on the screen. You'll also find it momentarily in the chat. And the Q&A is open for your questions. So, Stefan, you spoke so wonderfully about like all the positive benefits, also some of the challenges potentially that exist. But through your own experience, through conversations with people who have participated in things like the internship program, what do you think are some of the really tangible benefits, both for those who are interns or mentees and those who are in the other roles, such as community agency and community agencies?
Yeah, I think again for agency leaders, I think the most important, the biggest like benefit would be or tangible factor like that's kind of changed during the internship program would be that comfort and sort of even just like desire to welcome research within their practice because it is such a scary concept and really complicated, convoluted, and depending on the environment can be even quite toxic. So having good supportive people within that organization to expose them properly with, all these academic mentors that are, they're joining AVA because they want to support people. So having that sort of support that's founded on, I guess, good quality, I don't know how to say it, but with good spirit, is really important. I think it can dismantle that discomfort that agency leaders might have within research. And it's really important too because these internships are only a periodic time, right? It's like 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. So it's important that these community agencies also feel comfortable in continuing to do the work and evaluation once these interns are gone, because as time progresses, things change, there's new research, there's new ideas. So being able to evaluate whether the service that they are providing is still working for the same people or for different people as time progresses is really important. I think for interns too, like I mentioned, like we sit in class, we learn a lot, we sit at home, we write our papers, but it's a whole different experience to be able to actually apply this work within a practice and see how you can do that. Again, you can't just collect data on patients and people without doing it ethically, and sometimes it can be a burdensome approach. So you really have to think about those factors, and it's easy to think about, but to actually correctly know if you're like without experiencing it, you're not sure if what you're thinking about is actually correct. So having that opportunity to engage within a community-based agency and get that lived experience while also being paid is really, really a amazing experience because, as you know, it's costly to be a student.
Absolutely. I remember, dare I say, back in the day, my first paid internship while I was in my grad studies, and it was a lifesaver both in terms of the experience and also the funds that came from it.
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about while you were talking is all of these programs are so great and they have structure, but structure to a point. They're very flexible and adaptable based on who's participating and what their needs are. And I was wondering if you could speak just a bit more to that as well.
Yeah, I think like that was because equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility is like one of the core sort of guiding principles of AVA. We really wanted to make sure that when people are joining these programs, they also have flexibility, and it's super important to be flexible because if you think about each sort of member of this triad, we have academic mentors who are applying for grants, trying to get a lot of money, trying to publish papers, supervising their students, super busy. You have agency leaders who are running an organization or managing individuals, providing direct support to people, super busy. And you have students who I already mentioned, like courses, thesis, super busy. So having this flexible schedule really allows for a unique opportunity that doesn't feel burdensome and actually does still feel like helpful and um, provides growth to each sort of group. So that was like one of the biggest things, and it kind of deconstructs this idea that everything always has to be fast-paced and competitive.
Absolutely. So well said. Thank you. And I think actually that may bring us to the end. Questions haven't come in, but it was a very informative webinar. So I think you probably answered all the questions that may exist. And also, resources have been posted in the chat throughout if people want to access the publications Stefan referenced or look into these programs any further, like our health hubs. So, Stefan, on behalf of Ava and also myself, thank you again. It's always such a joy to have you as our guest on the webinars, and we hope you'll come back soon.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.